Welcome back, everybody, to the Cant I podcast. And I have a special guest on here today. This is Kyler, and he is my roommate. How long have we known each other, Kyler?
Dude, I don't know. When did you move in?
Moved in here on, I think, May 1st of 2019. And the reason that I moved in here is because my housing contract at some BYU housing ran up, and I decided to find a place that was pretty cheap. And this was a place that was only like $300 or $375 a month. Not too bad for a private room, at least in Utah. I mean, I don't know. It was about the cheapest I could find. And so the reason that I decided to bring Kyler on today is because A, we're roommates and I wanted to kind of get this thing going. And B, because Kyler actually joined the Mormon Church at some point during his life and has since left the Mormon Church. Kyler, tell me a little bit about why you decided to join the church.
So to be quite frank, it was for a girl. I was dating a girl in high school, and it was my first serious relationship. And it wasn't like I was just dating this Mormon girl. That was my only introduction to Mormonism. So all my friends were Mormon. All the people that I hung that around me were Mormon. Like the families that I knew were all Mormon because I was homeschooled in like a Mormon homeschool co-op is what it was called. And so it was something that I was very familiar with and was already like a part of because I would go to the stake dances and I would sometimes even go to like ward activities. And then I started dating this girl, and then it was like, well, I mean, yeah, I'll get baptized.
Okay, so we have a couple things to look into here. Did the Mormon girl, was she raised LDS?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how old were you when you started seeing her, or at least be interested in her?
I was 18 when we started dating.
So this didn't happen really till like senior year of high school.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was like the end of my senior year of high school, and she was a year younger than I was, so the start of her senior year. And we just started dating, and she didn't even really push me joining the church, but around the time when we started dating, missionaries, 2013.
Okay.
Yep. And my buddy Kevin baptized me, and it was cool. It was pretty packed. I felt like, I'm going to be honest, it felt good because everyone knew me already, and so the baptism was in the chapel, and it was there was a lot of people there, and so I felt like a celebrity. I felt really cool.
Yeah.
Everyone was all psyched for me. Everyone was coming up and being like, oh my gosh, Kyler, congratulations, because this was the one non-Mormon kid who hung out with everyone, and then all of a sudden he got baptized, and it was a big deal.
Right.
I would be in the drive-thru at a Carl's Jr. and people behind me would be like, hey, you're Kyler, oh my gosh, congratulations.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I spoke at the mission or the missionary conference. I was a convert that they brought in, and I once I served a mission, I understood what it was, but I had no idea what it was. I was just talking to a bunch of missionaries about this was pretty cool. I got baptized.
Right.
I have a testimony. And
so of course it was a lot easier for you to believe in the Mormonism when you became a celebrity. Because of it.
I was like, this is the shit.
That's like Tom Cruise and Scientology stuff right there.
Yeah, and it's I went
really.
from, but I was homeschooled, right? So I only had so many friends, and I felt like I was kind of a outsider and a bit weird because I didn't go to high school with all the people that I would see, and I already felt like I had to make an extra effort to put myself out there, and then all of a sudden it was boom, nice, sweet. And it's not, that wasn't to say that I didn't have friends, but it felt really good to walk into church and people would come up to me and be like, oh, God, I heard you talk at the missionary conference. And I was like, cool, dude.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense why you go so heavily into Mormonism because of that.
Yeah.
So where did that progress? Did you continue to date that girl after you got baptized, or where did you go next?
Yeah, so we dated for 8 months, which I say that was my first serious relationship, and I see the type of relationships people had in high school that were 4 years, and so it wasn't that long, but it was serious for me. And
Sure.
She broke up with me when she moved to college, and but at that point I had already like kind of made the decision to serve a mission, and her dad had told me that if I served a mission, he would match anything I saved for the mission cost.
Mm-hmm.
So basically it was a mission cost $10,000. I only had to make 5,000 because he would pay 5,000.
What a nice gesture.
Yeah. Well, it was a big deal because I didn't want to ask my parents for money for the mission, and so I was going to end up having to ask the stake for it, which they would have paid. Like the stake would have paid for my mission, but it was cool that, it was cool that he offered that. And then after she broke up with me, he approached me and was like, "Hey, that's still on the table. If you decide to serve a mission, like I will still do this for you." And I was like, "That's awesome. Thanks so much." So I was working at a Cold Stone where like half my friend group worked, and so I just would save money and put it away, and I made $5,000. And then August 2014, I served my mission.
How old were you when you left?
I was 19.
So you're 19, and where'd you get your call to?
Dallas, Texas.
So where were you originally? Because I don't think we talked about that.
Where was I originally?
Yeah.
So I'm from San Diego, Poway.
And that's why
suburb.
becoming Mormon was such a big deal for them, because they don't necessarily convert a lot of outsiders.
Yeah, they don't have a ton of converts, I don't think, and I mean, I think they do fine. It's, Poway is actually a pretty religious part of San Diego and Southern California. Like, there's a good amount of churches in Poway, and
why is there such a big Mormon presence in San Diego? Because I don't think a lot of non-Mormons would know.
There's the Mormon Battalion, which was a battalion of Mormons in...
I think it was the mid-1800s.
Yeah, I think it was a war with Mexico.
Yeah, I think so too.
A lot of the Mormon Battalion ended up in San Diego, and there's even like a Mormon Battalion exhibit in Old Town San Diego, and so they've had an influential presence there for a while. And it's not like overwhelming. It's not anything like what you would see in any part of Utah or Idaho,
but it's certainly more of a presence than like Los Angeles.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah. We have the temple there, and everyone really likes the San Diego temple. It's really pretty.
Yeah, it's a really nice temple.
Yeah.
I've actually visited that Mormon Battalion Museum. It was really cool. I was a little kid when I visited, but I always kind of thought it was interesting that, because Mormonism typically has strong roots in Utah, Idaho, Arizona, and then random parts throughout the country, and San Diego has a small part of that.
So why does it have the presence it has in Arizona?
I think a lot of it is bleed over from the Mexican-American War that the LDS were in. Part of it is, so when all the pioneers got to Salt Lake, a lot of them spread out from Salt Lake because they either wanted their own freedoms, or the prophets would tell them, hey, we want to colonize, we want to have as much territory out here as possible. How can we do that? Well, we'll send pioneers to go start their families, start their farms out in southern Idaho, northern Arizona areas. So right now, Flagstaff and like northern Arizona areas, they have a lot of Mormons out there, and you get a lot of BYU students who are from Arizona. And I don't know what the culture is like down there, because I've never lived in Arizona, but I know that it's a lot different than here in Utah.
Yeah.
So now we can kind of go into your mission.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I want to start first on, were your parents on board with Mormonism?
Yeah, I mean, so my parents aren't religious, but that's not to say that they're atheists. I mean, they're not atheists. My dad was raised, his mom was a Sunday school teacher, but she passed away when he was a teenager, and his dad wasn't very religious, so my dad was not raised very religious, but he had kind of his mom instilled kind of, I guess, a belief in God in him when he was younger. My mom is from Iran, and her dad is a non-practicing Muslim. And so she is, by Muslim tradition, considered a Muslim because, as far as I understand, they are considered to be born into the religion.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
And, but she's never practiced. She moved to America when she was young, and the Iran that she lived in was very different than the Iran that is today.
So what was the years that she was in Iran? Do you know?
I don't know. I think she moved. I think my grandpa moved them when she was 12. I want to say.
So it must have been pre-1979, pre-revolution.
Yes.
Iran.
Yeah. It was. It was.
Pre-
she didn't have to wear the hijab.
Okay. Yeah, because
Yeah.
the regime in Iran in the mid-70s was a lot different than how it is now. It was
Yes.
much less radical, and it was much more Western friendly. I'm not sure how the U.S. politics plays into that, and I'm sure that it's very interesting. Thing that you came from having an Iranian mom and having a dad who isn't.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how that worked within your own life, like where you would have seen that, like Islam influence and.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, not as much as you might think. So, because Iran was very westernized when my mom left, and yes, U.S. politics plays heavily into the way Iran changed over time. We don't need to talk about the CIA right now. So.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to have your mom come on the show and tell us about it, because or your grandpa.
She knows quite a bit. I want to do interviews with my grandpa. Yeah. So, but that is to say, I mean, there wasn't actually a ton of Middle Eastern presence, like cultural presence in my growing up. There were a couple traditions that my mom would put out, little like gold coins and certain spices for certain holidays that I think were just traditions that she enjoyed and gave her a little different almost decoration for certain times of the years. She's done that less over time, but those things, and then my dad actually learned to cook Persian food to impress my grandpa, and so I've grown up eating Persian food, but it's been my dad's cooking, which is excellent. And I mean, I think we go to Persian restaurants more than the average family, but that's like the extent of the.
So because what Iran was somewhat westernized, I mean, we see photos of women wearing like skirts in college, which is amazing. Like to see how the Middle East is now,
shorts.
We're like, it definitely is like an idealistic person. I kind of wish that, they weren't so radical as they are now, because they definitely had but I don't know the full history on it, so maybe I'm wrong there.
Well, so do all the Iranians, as far as
the Iranians do. Okay.
Yeah, most Iranians are not happy with the current regime.
Huh. Well, that would be a very interesting topic to talk about. So I had a follow-up question. So let's go back to your mission.
Right. So that is to say, I guess to answer your original question, we got off track. But that is to say, my mom has told me that she wishes I would have put more thought and even prayer into the decision to be baptized. But that I was an adult, and my parents are excellent in. It's funny. There's a quote by Joseph Smith that is something along the lines of, "I teach good principles and let them govern themselves." And I've never seen that in anyone more than my parents. And so they trusted me to make the decision that I felt was right for me, and they've always done that, and just trusted that they taught me true principles and good principles on how to live a good life, and that I would follow that.
That sounds like really good parenting.
That was their take on my decision to be baptized.
Okay. Yeah, because it sounds like they're letting you make your own decisions, and whether or not they think that you're making the right decision doesn't matter as long as you feel like you are,
right,
and that you're going to live a good life. Because within Mormonism, of course, there are lots of problems that come with it, but there are also a lot of really good principles that Mormonism has that anybody can latch onto. For example, the main one is eternal families, or being more connected and close to being with your family. Mormons love to have big families. They love doing lots of family activities, and that's something that society's kind of getting away from, that Mormonism does a good job with.
Yeah, and so when I say all my friends were LDS, that means, my mom's friends were LDS, because they would the moms would hang out in the co-op, the moms would teach classes together, and they interacted, and so my mom knew all these LDS families. And they were her friends. She liked them. She knew that, for the most part, they are happy. And she was confident that if I even long term and like forever, made myself a part of that community, that I could be happy and that it would be that it's a good community overall. That is to say, not every aspect of the community is great. We don't need, I mean, we can or cannot, but, you know, she trusted that if I wanted to be a part of that community forever, that I could be happy.
Okay. So now you're heading on your mission to Dallas. Tell us about your first couple of weeks in Dallas.
Okay. So I got paired with a friend of mine from high school, was my trainer. Which was like...
That's kind of strange that you got with somebody you already knew.
Yeah, because I knew he was on his mission. We weren't super close, but our families had been... Well, I guess our families had known each other a long time. And then we had actually kind of grown apart in high school, but just not for any particular reason. We were still friends. And so I had emailed him when I got my call and said like, hey, I'm coming to Dallas, Spanish speaking. I was Spanish speaking. And when he was called as a trainer, he was like, oh man, this is gonna be crazy if I'm training Kyler. And then, yeah, we got paired together and it was pretty cool. I think that really helped me assimilate to the mission, that it wasn't totally like new.
Right. You had at least one thing in the mission that you already knew.
Yeah, and he was pretty bad about it. He would call me Kyler sometimes instead of Elder Pigott, which he was a very strict missionary, and so he would beat himself up over that. Yeah, he was a very, very obedient missionary. And I got put in South Dallas in a place called Oak Cliff. No, I was put in Grand Prairie. Sorry, those places are right next to each other. I served in both of them, but I started in a place called Grand Prairie, which Selena Gomez is from.
Ooh.
Yeah.
There's a lot of famous people from Texas.
Yeah. And it was cool. I was on bikes, and to be honest, I was having a good time for the most part. I would kind of bitch and moan about being tired, and I was learning the Spanish, so that was tough, but...
You had to go speaking Spanish? You didn't say that before.
Yes, yeah, I was...
Did you know Spanish before?
No, I didn't know any Spanish. I had taken some German in college because I had taken some college classes, and I didn't know any Spanish. I learned in the MTC, and then I learned a lot my first transfer. It was honestly really cool to watch my Spanish develop, because
I would imagine.
It was just, I could only speak Spanish. I couldn't speak English with most of the people that we were talking to, and then my companion was very strict, so he tried to make sure we spoke in Spanish to each other, and it was really cool to learn Spanish that way.
Yeah, because it sounds like at first you wouldn't have known any words, and then over time you're like, hey, I can actually develop full sentences.
Yeah.
I can ask for anything I want.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting.
And it helps, it's so cool because it helps that the members you talk to are so encouraging, like, oh man, Elder, your Spanish is so good, and that's cool. And then I don't think I could have learned a language the way I did. I mean, like, as thoroughly as I did so quickly any other way. It was just really awesome.
Because you're just thrown in.
Yeah, it was really cool.
Do you still know your Spanish?
I still know pretty well enough to have conversations. I use it at work sometimes.
Okay. Yeah, because I think it would be good to keep it up like that.
Yeah, and I'd like to keep it up more, and so sometimes when I apply for jobs, I'll like look for jobs that are kind of like want Spanish speakers, almost because if I got the job, I'd force myself,
of course,
to learn better Spanish.
You could also make more money.
It'd be helpful. Oh, totally. And so I definitely put on there, I definitely have on my resume that I speak Spanish, can read and write Spanish, and if I need it, I will improve it, but I can still use it.
Okay. So at this point, you're a couple weeks into the mission with this companion. Is there anything different about being in Dallas that was different than being in California? Is there any cultural differences?
Yeah, well, in the first area that I was in, I mean, I don't know if this is necessarily what you were thinking, but
go for it.
One thing that stood out to me was in the first area that I was in, there would be packs of dogs on the streets.
Packs of dogs?
Yeah.
Why?
So this was a pretty poor part of Dallas. There was a lot more minorities than other parts of Dallas, and
they weren't neutering their dogs.
And I don't think they were neutering their dogs. And then there were just packs of dogs and like different breeds, and there was like a Chihuahua and then like a freaking it was mostly packs of Chihuahuas. But
that sounds terrible.
Yeah,
I hate Chihuahuas.
And it was pretty weird, wild to see that, and we'd just be riding our bikes on one side of the street, and this pack of dogs would just go down the other. So it's not like there was like tons, but you would see a couple dogs walking around together just in the middle of the street every couple days.
I imagine you'd see a bunch of dog bodies everywhere too.
Not so much.
Really?
Yeah, I don't.
Maybe
not
they did a good job
remember.
with getting rid of them.
Or, I don't know.
You liked being able to just experience a lot of different subcultures within a big culture.
Yeah, and we would do service, and we would go to like a food bank and help them out, and that was cool. A lot of the service I did was at food banks because they were really easy to volunteer for. And
is there a big need is there food shortages out there or more than here?
It's just for struggling people, but there's quite a few food banks in Dallas.
Okay.
Yeah. One kind of funny story. The first district meeting I went to, there was this sister missionary who was like, she was a pretty good looking girl, and I was trying to I was so new, and then I see this girl, and I'm like, haven't talked to a girl in a while. I'm like,
you're a little.
They're asking me about my Spanish and stuff, and I go, well, my Spanish isn't so great because I learned German in college, and she goes in totally fluent German, oh, you speak German, and I was like, well, my German isn't so good because I've been learning Spanish for the past 6 weeks. It was just so embarrassing.
So you got caught bullshitting.
It was awful, and I was just beat red. And I was like, this is the worst. I don't even like it. Not a super obedient missionary. I was in my second area. I had a companion who would listen to music, and we ended up becoming really close friends with our next door neighbors. That was this young couple who had a kid while we were there, and we were very close with them. We would play video games with them and watch movies, but at the same time we would try to teach them, and we were still going and teaching lessons, and we were still doing things that missionaries are supposed to do. But and at night when we came home, we might go next door and play Call of Duty. And so that continued throughout my mission, where I had companions who were less obedient, and we would go to movies. I remember seeing one of the Fast and the Furiouses that came out of my mission the day it came out.
Oh.
I was in Oak Cliff, which is where I mentioned earlier, right next to my first area, and I was with a companion who had an iPod Touch and I think a phone, and we were, we would go out and teach, and we would go do things, but then just like before, we would come home and we would do whatever we wanted. And
was this more of you saying that I don't want to be part of the mission? Is it more of just letting the other person dictate what you did? Or what was it? No,
so he would have stayed home all day and just been on his phone or whatever all day.
Oh.
And he was from El Salvador, I want to say.
So he didn't want to go there, basically.
I don't know. I mean, I think a lot of missionaries were disobedient, but it's not like they didn't want to go. I can't speak to that because I was disobedient, but it's not like I didn't want to be there for the most part.
Okay.
To be honest, I look back on my mission and I have fond memories.
That actually brings up a really good point, because I think a lot of it is that me as being a person who grew up in Utah and hearing all the really good stories, I didn't necessarily hear all of the misbehaving stuff. And I always thought of it as there being one missionary who was very, very dedicated and then the other one not being. But in reality, what you're saying, and that what makes more sense than that, is that there's 80% of hard effort, I'm trying really hard, but then there's also 20% where you're like, I gotta relax.
There is a huge spectrum of disobedience on the mission. There's missionaries who will not break any rule for any reason. They just they follow the White Handbook to the T.
And those are the ones we hear a lot about.
And those are the ones that are in the movies, and those are the ones that hear a lot. In the movies.
Well, they are Mormon movies.
Yeah, in the Mormon movies. In the movies.
Other side of heaven.
Yeah, exactly. And then but on the other side, there's the ones that just don't want to be there, and their disobedience. They won't even put it in the Mormon movies. Their disobedience is just being pouty and not wanting to go out and work. But in reality, Like, disobedience is more of like, well, I just want to watch movies and I want to play video games and I want to be hanging out. And there's the ones that don't want to be there at all and want to do those things, and then there's ones that want to be there and be working, but at the same time they're like, hey, on Monday, why can't I go bowling? Or, I mean, and you can. Why can't I go to a movie? Why can't Sunday night I sleep over with other missionaries and we can just hang out? And, like, on my time, why can't I do my thing? And so there's this whole big spectrum of, like, obedience and disobedience.
Spectrum is a perfect word to use there.
Yeah.
I never thought of it that way because I didn't go on a mission.
And so, like I said, I look back on my mission with generally fond memories and good nostalgia, but that is because I had, I think, more fun on my mission. I let myself be myself.
Sounds like you had more optimism too. Optimism breeds having good memories.
And I taught well. I mean, I'll speak to how I felt about it. I felt like I was a good teacher, and I had numerical success on my mission that I felt like whenever I was going to feel guilty for being disobedient, I justified with, but I'm good at it.
Okay. So you had optimism in part, not just because you were a celebrity going into the mission, but also because
I felt like I was doing well.
You were doing a good job. Because, I mean, you go to Europe or somewhere, you might baptize one person, 0 people. How many baptisms did you have? Do you know? Do you remember?
I do remember. I had 23. And I remember that number because I wanted to have one for every month on my mission, and I didn't. And a lot of them came from one area where we just taught a ton, and it was a very poor area, and we baptized kids that were part of less active families that just hadn't been baptized and different things like that. But
so they weren't necessarily difficult numbers to
No, they weren't difficult numbers, but I figured out how to do that and get the numbers.
And you got good at it.
And then that's what I did.
Yeah.
And I had a good time with it because we could go out and we could teach, and we knew we had lessons. And then, I would go to the gym in the morning when I wasn't supposed to because our mission said we couldn't. And on Sundays we drove down to other missionaries and hung out with them Sunday night for P-Day. So I had a good time on mission.
Yeah, that doesn't sound too bad. Okay, so is there anything else you want to share about the mission before we move on to getting home?
Oh, well, okay, at one point I did get in quite a bit of trouble, and I was almost sent home.
Oh, really? Gotta hear this.
I honestly don't even remember specifically what it was, because I had done so many disobedient things. When I got this, I think it was about me and a sister missionary, but nothing ever happened between us. But I would flirt with the sister missionaries, and when one would flirt back, people would notice, and that got reported up the line, and my mission president knew that I was disobedient, and now he thought I was disturbing the missions of other people, and he got very frustrated with me, and I don't remember what it was, but I ended up having to meet with him. He talked to Area 70, my state president called me, and I, for the life of me, can't even remember what the specific event was that put it there, because I was just
you were just doing
a disobedient missionary.
Yeah.
The
line had been crossed already, so you didn't know.
I remember getting a phone call from him. I had thought things had kind of blown over, but I remember the start of a transfer. I was put with this elder that I did not want to be with because I knew he's a good guy, but he was a little nerdy, and he was obedient, and he wanted to work hard all the time.
He wouldn't let you goof off
and
as much?
He didn't want me to goof off, and I got a phone call from my mission president the first day of the transfer, and he was like, Elder Pigott, I am sick. I am sick of this. I'm sick of the disobedience in this mission, and it needs to stop. And he was so mad. And that, when I thought things had blown over, that was the phone call that was like, oh, he's like, I'm going to talk to the area authority. We're going to decide if you need to go home. I'm going to need you to come in. And it's kind of a big deal. And, I think it was because I hot tubbed.
What's that?
I went in a hot tub.
Oh,
you
hot
weren't
tub.
supposed to go swimming at all. Like it was that was weirdly one of the biggest rules, was like you're not allowed to swim as a missionary. And it's like, I think it's like scriptural based.
Yeah,
but really
I think
it's like
Satan resides in the water.
Yeah, Satan resides in the water, but like really it's an insurance thing. But I went in the hot tub because we had all been put, a couple of us very disobedient missionaries had been put in the president's district. We were in his area because that was where the APs were, and that was where the president was, and this was like probation area. This is like, you were either super good and you were assigned to a super disobedient missionary, or you were super disobedient missionary and you were assigned to a good missionary.
So they had a lot more watchful eye over you.
Exactly. And so, but it was dumb because it put a bunch of us disobedient missionaries in one district, and we would do transfers and exchanges, and like, so a couple of us went hot tubbing. My companion told, like, up the line, and that was what I think what pushed it to the line that I almost got sent home for.
So basically you got put in detention, and then you did whatever you want.
Yeah.
And it got worse.
So, yeah, and like, I didn't end up going home because I was repentant, and I talked to my mission president, and I think it was very clear to my stake president when he called me that if I went home, I was not going to go back to church, because that would have been, because I did not feel justified in them sending me home, and that embarrassment for me doing something like swimming. I thought that was ridiculous, and that if that was going to be their policy, I was not going to go back to church. And I think that was clear to my state president, and I think that influenced the decision because he knew it would have been so easy for me to just go home and go back to my life without the church.
Yeah. Well, I didn't actually think of it in the ways that you said with the insurance, because that makes it's like, well, why can't I take responsibility for my own actions? You know?
That's a theory I had about that. That
it makes a lot of sense considering how much money goes into, every time a missionary dies, the church is kind of screwed. So keeping missionaries out of the water is very important, because a lot of people die swimming. But I think at some level you have to make personal choices of what you're going to do and say, I want to go swimming.
Yeah. There's a lot less accountability in the mission than the church preaches. It was that we had a sleepover at the AP's apartment, because they had this big apartment with a bunch of beds for when new missionaries came in. And we slept over the night before a bunch of new missionaries came in, right? And so it was the whole district, all in these bunk beds, and we're all hanging out. That's why the call was right after transfers, because I was up talking to this missionary who had Skype on his iPad, because we had iPads, and he was Skyping some girl he knew in Fort Worth. And they were like sexting. And she came over. And he left, and I was the only one who knew he left. And I told him, you're going to get in trouble for this, but do what you want. And I went to sleep. He left. They did stuff. He came back. He told me in the morning, and I said, okay, dude, do what you want. But which I don't agree in this opinion that I told him anymore. For some reason I told him, but you should probably tell president. So transfers came. We're at the transfers church, and the president is there, and this elder tells the mission president what happened, and he tells him that I knew. And so he got sent home, and then that was what the council and like the phone call with my stake president, the meetings with my mission president.
So he snitched on you.
He snitched on me for something that he did.
What the hell?
Yeah. So
you did that.
I almost got sent
I didn't
home.
do anything.
Yeah.
Come on.
And that's why that's why I was so sure that if I got sent home for something that another elder did, that I was not going to go back to church. And
are you kidding me?
So that's what it was.
Wow.
I'm glad I remember
What's
that.
his name? Blast him out.
I don't remember his name.
Oh.
I don't even remember his name. I think he went home, and he is married, and I think he like went back to church, and he's like, last I remember, he like went back to church, but I don't remember.
Because, yes, obviously it's wrong that you were going against the rules, but I do think there's an element of free choice and free will that
and
everyone
that's what
has
I told
to
him. I
make.
was like, dude,
And
You're
he
gonna
made
get in
that
trouble.
choice.
If you go with this girl and hook up with her, you're gonna get sent home.
That's like the most Mormon shit too, because Mormons...
Like, I was straight up supposed to restrain him.
Mormons don't lie. Mormons, like, when they are put in front of the bishop, they're going to snitch. They always do. I snitched on my friends. I mean, I snitched on myself. I mean, all Mormons are kind of forced and brainwashed to snitch on themselves. When they're like, you know...
When you're repenting, you have to tell everything.
Right. I mean, of course, you shouldn't always keep things a secret when they need to be. But there's an element, especially of trust, where you gotta just not tell people the whole truth.
Yeah, well, that's what the honor code is all. Code office.
The honor code
is all about and everything. So, yeah, that's how I almost got sent home.
So that probably made you start questioning the church.
Yes, and that made me think, like, man, and I thought of it as, man, the mission doesn't seem to hold the truths of the church the way I thought it would. I was like, man, this seems more fair. I thought of it in the terms of scriptures because it was what I was doing all the time. I was like, this seems like Pharisees, like we're prescribed certain actions, and I was frustrated. And then I became frustrated with like the rules and like, why are you telling me what to do? And that's when I started, because before it was like whatever. And then when I almost got sent home, I was like frustrated with this. I was like, look, I'm doing good missionary things. I'm baptizing people. I'm teaching people. And
that's actually a good point of, we're allowed to make free will choices within church, which you were allowed to do. But there's also this level of, if you try to control everybody too much, that they'll start questioning it. Mm-hmm. But if you can have that balance, which I think you had in San Diego, or at least a lot of these members seem to have in San Diego, where it's a healthy relationship between, you know, yes, we want to follow what the prophets and the apostles tell us, but we also choose to make these decisions as in, we can drink coffee because truly, listen, Mormons, coffee is fine. Anything in excess is bad, but if you're just drinking a little bit of coffee, you're not going to die.
Right.
Same thing with smoking a little weed or anything else like that. Of course, tobacco's bad. I think tobacco's the one thing that Mormon has actually hit on. Where's the point in the Word of Wisdom where we're saying, eat a healthy diet, drink enough water, stop drinking Diet Coke, okay? Because there are a lot of obese Mormons that, you know, that needs to be in the Word of Wisdom. If anything, I think the Word of Wisdom should evolve to where teaching members how to have better fitness choices and better exercise, better dieting, all that could be very beneficial for the church.
Yeah, and like the Word of Wisdom does say that. I mean, it doesn't say that in so many words, but it does. The Word of Wisdom does go into healthy living and eating grains and vegetables and limiting, you know, and not eating in excess. You know, when it talks about taking harmful things into the bodies in general, and I think it's just that the church latches on to things that are very easy to measure. And so you can say you either have drinking alcohol or you haven't. And those are the things that are latched onto and became the important parts of the Word of Wisdom, when if they focused on, if the community focused on a healthier living in general and took the Word of Wisdom as a encouragement to be healthy and to take care of their bodies, I think it would be much more beneficial.
Wow, Kyler's spitting facts out here.
Then I came home, and it was cool. I was very excited. I had a good time being a missionary, but I wanted to be home, and it was a good ending to an overall good experience. Right,
because it sounds like the majority of it was a good time, besides the end.
Yeah, and you make friends out there, and you're out there with people you know, and it's exciting to go to like mission meetings and see friends, and there's things to look forward to, and there's, you know, there's hard parts, and there's companions you don't like, and there's areas that are tough, but I think if you don't, I think you can make it harder on yourself, and some people do that.
Why did you leave the church?
So I guess the terminology that I thought of it in was I had become disenchanted with the church. I was starting to be more aware of certain policies they had and certain things that they had done. I saw the way they had treated blacks in the priesthood in the past, and I saw this pattern reoccurring where how they were treating the LGBTQ plus community, and that was something that stood out to me that was becoming more and more frustrating to me to see that. And then I was watching General Conference, and I was aware of certain homeless issues that was going on in Salt Lake. I think it was on my radar that there were like conversations about where to put a homeless shelter. So that was kind of in the back of my mind as something that I had read about recently. And then I was watching General Conference, and they announced several temples that they were going to build.
Mm-hmm.
And they were putting one of them, I think, 10 minutes away from where I knew a temple already was. And I think it's the American Fork Temple.
What's it close to?
I don't know, somewhere across the freeway.
I'm sure, I believe you. I believe that there's probably 2 temples within like less than 20 minutes of each other.
Yeah, it was something like that. And I just remember thinking like, how much do temples cost? Like what else could that money be going to?
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked into it, and I was like, okay, temples cost $30 million to make, and then $500,000 every year to upkeep, or something like that. It's astronomical amounts of money. And I thought to myself, well, couldn't that money be like put towards maybe the homeless community in Salt Lake City, right at their doorsteps, people who it could actually help? And I remember reading something about, I think it's Hindu temples that are in a way, and please correct me if I'm wrong, this is what I remember reading about, that in a way were made as community centers for the struggling, where they would serve food out of them and they would provide shelter. And these were their temples. And I thought that'd be so cool. Why can't a temple be somewhere where you take care of the people around you who are in need? And
absolutely,
the church has the Bishop Storehouse, and the church provides a lot for their community that's struggling. But I was looking at the money that was going into the temple, and I was looking at the community that's struggling, that they're not taking care of, and thinking, why can't they do more when they have so much more?
Yeah.
It's like, yes, they do philanthropic things, but they could do so much more.
Right, because it's the percentage of the money.
Right.
It's the LDS Church is probably giving 1% of their earnings or less.
Of their, now we know, $124 billion.
$billion.
Of my story. So
yeah, go ahead.
So once I started looking into like the finance, I started looking into other parts of the church, and that led me primarily to the CES Letter, which I ended up purchasing a hard copy of because I felt it's online, obviously, as a PDF. I ended up purchasing a hard copy of it because I felt it was so influential in my life, because it just listed out every single falsity about the church, every single part where any one of those, let me see if I can put this right. The church makes truth claims that box itself in a corner by claiming to be the one true church with no faults, and claiming that prophets, when they are speaking for God, are speaking eternal truths that won't change. The things they claim about their structure and the things that their prophets say, box it into a corner, in that if one thing is wrong, if one thing is false, if the Book of Mormon isn't entirely true, or if Joseph Smith's testimony falls, or if you learn that, that they've lied to you about the way Joseph Smith translated the Book of Mormon, or all these different aspects, or how many different versions of the first vision there are, and how many times it's changed, or the fact that the Book of Mormon, when put in a plagiarism test device, was considered plagiarized or was considered to have had heavy influence from a book called The View of the Hebrews, that was published several years before the Book of Mormon was, and that was
in the
known
same region
to be available in his area. And so when these things start becoming,
it's so obvious.
When these things start coming forward, because of the way the church has claimed their truth, has claimed that it's all true because every single aspect of it is 100% true, if you take one pillar out, it all falls. Don't know how someone with genuine intent to view the church in an unbiased way could read the CES letter, which is all verified, cited information that you can follow to the source, can read the CES letter and still believe the church to be true the way that it claims it is. That isn't to say that the church doesn't have good aspects. That isn't to say the church doesn't have good influence on people's lives, but it cannot be true the way that it claims to be.
And there's your plug for Jeremy.
But my final decision to take my records out, that led me to be completely inactive. I had stopped wearing garments, I stopped paying tithing, I stopped going to church. And then there was a movement called Protect LDS Children that was in response to the recently made, I don't know how to put this, in response to the fact that
bishops were molesting children.
People were coming forward that bishops had been molesting children, that inappropriate extensions of the temple recommend interviews were happening, in which bishops would ask young children intimate details about their sexual lives. And there was a movement called Protect LDS Children that was intended to get the church to change the policy regarding temple recommend interviews in order to protect children. And the church fought against that, and certain changes have been made that make it more clear that parents can be in the room, that another adult can be in the room when interviews are happening, and certain good changes were made in response to this movement, though I do not feel that they went as far as they should have. That paired with, at the same time, simultaneously, a woman had come forth with a recording of the MTC mission president admitting to having molested sister missionaries while he was in the MTC, serving as the mission president, in a position of
garbage.
Yeah.
Tests are the worst. They are like teaching monkeys how to swim. Testing monkeys on how they can swim. And that's not... Everybody learns differently, and that's something that society forgets. So I think homeschooling could be super beneficial to that.
And so that's another thing that my mom did very well. It created conflict, but my mom wasn't super structured in the way she homeschooled us, which I think if I were to homeschool my kids, I would be more structured, because that's what I think, looking back, I needed in order to get a bit of a better education. But I did get to learn a lot of what I wanted to, and I think that's made me a bit of a... I think I'm a pretty well-rounded person, and I think that comes from, I got to try out so many different things growing up. And my mom would consider it a successful learning day if I learned how to cook a new meal, full 3-course dinner, or if I learned how to play something on the piano. It was very unstructured, but I got to learn what I wanted to learn. And that was good and bad, in the sense that when I came into college, I really struggled with math, and I had never learned... I mean, I had, but I had to really hone in my, writing structure to learn the different formats that you're supposed to write in properly. And so things that I think you might have learned in high school if you were in a more structured system, but I also learned other things that I think have made me a pretty well-rounded person today.
Yeah, I think you're a pretty good guy, and I think homeschooling must have some sort of effect on that.
Yeah. I would have had a very, very different life.
Yeah.
And a very, very different lifestyle had I not been homeschooled. I think had I not been homeschooled, I never would have become Mormon for sure.
Oh, yeah.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, there's no way.
Yeah. So I'd be in a very, very different place.
What are some of the best positive personality traits that you have, or things that you currently think that are super positive that you've gained from being homeschooled? That's a very introspective question,
I know,
so
and
maybe
like,
it's too deep.
I'm a pretty introspective guy. I'm just trying to figure out what traces back specifically to homeschooling.
I would say that your empathy is definitely something that public school systems make people lose.
You think so?
Mm-hmm.
See, I wouldn't have known that. Because I think, yes, if I was to list out things I think I'm pretty good at, I think I'm a pretty empathetic guy. I think I can feel genuinely for people in different situations. And I would never have known that a public school system might take that out of you.
Yeah, because I felt like I grew up in the regular public school system, and I always felt like I wasn't as empathetic as I should be. It took me a lot of introspection and a lot of time to start actually caring about other people more. So
yeah,
that's definitely a bad thing that public school system's done to me.
Yeah, I think I still like to learn things, and I enjoy doing new things, and I think that came from the fact that I could do new things so many times. Now, I'll say bad traits, like I said, I didn't have a lot of structure, and so I struggle when I don't have structure. I make like lists. When I really need to do things, I have to like put it on a list and just like make sure I have it laid out and know exactly how I'm going to do it. I crave structure, I think, in my life now because of the way I was raised.
Not to therapize you too much, not that therapize is a word, but I don't really know what the word is for that. It sounds like becoming LDS was almost your rebellious phase because you were seeking like a really systematic approach to something and to life itself, and that's the opposite of what you had growing up.
Yeah, and I definitely enjoyed that about the LDS Church, even in the large scale, that it pretty much just lays your life out for you. Like, you've got a step-by-step process on how to live a happy life, and it's like, cool, if I do these things, I'll be good. And that, I thought that was great. I was into that. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed the structure of the church in the sense that it had structure, that it had a path to follow, pretty much. Every step of the way it had instructions.
For me, it's been for me it's the opposite because I grew up in such a heavy, straight structure, and now me realizing that, maybe it's not true, to have to change everything about my life to become like not Mormon. I don't know how to live my life not being Mormon, and that's why I feel like I'm so screwed up. My whole life has been completely reversed upside down, and I think a lot of people who have left the church feel the exact same way. People who either started at a really young age or were born into the LDS Church feel the exact same way that I do. That you have to repave your entire life. Like, everything that you do is now your own choice, and figuring out what you want to do with that choice is the hardest decision ever. And if Mormons know exactly what I'm talking about, because I went to school in business management and I have no idea why. The only reason I did is because I wanted to make my family proud, go down that route. But I never actually thought to myself, well, why am I doing this? Well, to have a job, to have all these things that society tells us to have, that maybe we can have these other routes that aren't just college.
You make a point. You made a point too that once you leave the church, you had all these decisions and this pathway laid out for you, and that once you leave the church, you're like, shoot, what am I like? I have all the choices to myself. I can do whatever I want, and that's a struggle in and of itself. And for any of your listeners in college, that's exactly what it's like to graduate too, and it
sucks.
Quite a shock to the system when you get off work and you don't have anything that you have to do. Yeah, it's weird. Both of us are in the same spot where it's like, well, what do I actually want to do with my own life? Because I can go home and I can do whatever I want. Like, truly do. When you're in such stable positions as we both are, we have jobs that we're not going to get fired from because they're government funded, and they're both jobs that working for the man.
We're working for the man, and we're not working for, like, we make enough money that money isn't a problem. It's not that we don't have enough money to buy food, but we also don't have enough money to buy like a yacht kind of thing ever. So
Right.
we're in this point where we're kind of just stuck. So we spend a lot of time thinking, especially a lot of time thinking when we're not sober. And that makes us question reality itself.
Where even were we? Sorry, we're probably gonna have to just end it.
That was a very deep thought.
Yeah.
Maybe we should just kill it there. Thank you guys for listening to my podcast. It's the Canon Thinks Show. I haven't quite came up with the perfect name for it yet. I want it to be Canon Thinks, so you guys can leave me suggestions and keep listening because it really means a lot. This is my passion project. This is my creative outlet. Thanks.